The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome aboard this train. I'm telling you, we're about to leave the station, but we're not going to do it without you. This is the Legal Synopsis. I am D Nice, and I'm with one of the hottest attorneys in the business on the planet right now until we get to Mars, and then she's going to take that over too. I'm talking about the one, the only, my friend, my girl, and your entertainment guru. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Miss Ronda Dixon. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Good evening. I'm really happy to be here.
Glad to have you here.
I love the legal synopsis because I like to help people to understand the law better and also to understand how they can protect themselves and how they can use a lawyer more effectively.
Yeah, because that's what, especially in today's climate, when it seems like from the top all the way down, nobody's dealing with legal justification, legal injunctions. It's all about what I want to do. And that's not according to the law. But if you find yourself needing an attorney, it's best to know that you can call one. Because I know a bunch of people that go and do their own attorney. And then there's a saying that says something about a fool having his own self as an attorney.
Right, you have a fool for a lawyer.
Right.
Basically, it says, he who represents himself has a fool for a lawyer.
Wow.
And the reason for that is that there's things you can't see. And say, for instance, look, how would it look if you're cross-examining yourself? If you're representing yourself, you should take the witness stand at some time.
Right.
And at that time, what are you going to do? Do like Jim Carrey and run from one side to the other? What do you think about this? And then, you're jumping in the witness stand and jumping over to where the attorney is supposed to be. So it doesn't give you the proper perspective, it doesn't look good in court.
Right, I see that. But that's been my life so far, so I can pull it off, you know what I'm saying? Because I basically have these conversations when you're trying to do something in your own business or whatever. Oftentimes, you can't wait for that other partner. You got to just figure it out. And
when you're talking about that, though, that's a different situation. There's informal and there's formal resolutions. And there's small claims court where you are allowed to represent yourself, and it's set up that way.
Okay.
So even if you were to bring witnesses, the court is kind of set up in a way where even the judge will sometimes be you and ask questions. So if you did take the witness stand, the judge might ask the questions of you.
Okay.
And sometimes they even do that in real court, in the regular civil court or criminal court. Sometimes if the judge feels like the attorney isn't asking some questions or the court would like to know some questions, the answers to some questions that they want to consider in making their ruling, and they don't feel like that answer has come out.
Right.
They might say the judge may ask questions from the bench of the witness. So that's interesting.
They're gonna get the answers they're looking for.
Well, they have to,
right?
Because if there's some, we call it the prima facie case, and if you need some elements to make that case or make that defense. Or whatever you're trying to argue, and they're not there, sometimes the judge will ask those questions. And then sometimes the judge goes off on a tangent. I've had the judge ask questions, like one time I was in an unlawful detainer matter with the person who had sublet a restaurant. And the judge started saying, well, it would really be nice if the owner came. Well, the person who's bringing the unlawful detainer is not the owner, and that should be something that the judge should realize. But he actually recessed the case indefinitely because of COVID-19 for us to get the owner to come in.
Got you.
And the owner had nothing to do with it. It was actually a contract between these two parties. So, sometimes you're thinking, wow, what is he thinking,
Right. So it's good for you guys out there to hear something that relates to you and pick up a phone and call. By the time we finish with this one, you're going to have enough questions answered and enough situations so you can say, okay, if I need a great attorney, this is the one I want to talk to. So now let's jump into some questions about where you're at and what you do. Okay. If you need to call in, you can. 323-815-4204. That's 323-815-4204. And you can always watch us on YouTube, which is Morse Media Studios, or MorseMediaLive.com. All right? And visit MorseMediaStudios.com because we always got other shows out there that we want to bring you up on. Ronda, This is not her first rodeo, so she's got some other information there too. So now we're going to jump into a little thing you have your own practice too. So let's say, what is your vision for the Dixon Justice Center?
My vision is to be able to help people, especially people that are underserved, to make sure that they get justice. Not just, it's socioeconomic, it's criminal law. We're doing criminal law.
Okay.
We're doing unlawful detainers and foreclosures and just a lot of things that are really affecting people in this climate, which is domestic violence and family law. There's a lot of custody and family law issues coming up with domestic violence restraining orders.
Right.
Because now that people are cooped up together, whatever things they were running from or could avoid, they can't avoid them anymore.
Right.
And so we're finding a larger number of cases for domestic violence and child abuse and people that want custody or that want modifications of custody orders or that want to file divorce. And so that's the family law issue. And then the other issue is civil rights. We have a lot of protests going on. And a lot of people are out here, protesting and wanting to have their voice heard and want to exercise their free speech. But yet they're getting shot by rubber bullets. They're getting roughed up by the police. And even just in an everyday sense, people need to know what they can and cannot do if they're detained by the police. And a lot of people don't understand the rules. And because they also conflict in different territories. The rules here in California are a lot different, and they've been changing as we speak, although I don't think the police are as up to par on that because I used to work for the California District Attorneys Association when I was in law school, and I used to write for the prosecutor's brief. And we used to do things, we call them cheat sheets, where we would literally write a synopsis of a case and just make it one page saying what the case stood for and how you can use it in court. That was for the DAs to use. But the DAs would also have seminars, which they do probably to this day, where they speak to law enforcement about what is probable cause, what is a reasonable suspicion, and give them the heads up on what the latest cases are. Case in point, there was a case that said that smelling marijuana was a reasonable suspicion such that you could search a person's vehicle. So all of a sudden, after this training, there's a rash of cases where all the police say is, I smelled marijuana. But interestingly enough, they searched the vehicle and found absolutely no marijuana. They found a whole bunch of other stuff, supposedly, but they never found the marijuana, which was the reasonable suspicion and the probable cause for them to search.
Wow. Yeah, this climate nowadays is just really crazy, and it's good you brought up a few things like that with the training implementation of these new laws and how they fit in according to those wearing the badges. Because I know our friend and owner here, Miss Poetess Felicia, she had an opportunity to interview the police chief a couple days ago.
Wow.
And you definitely, guys, you got to get up on it. When you go to Morse Media
and
you're looking up at the YouTube, you got to check out that interview. That was a great interview she had with Chief Moore. Michael Moore came down, and he was really, and then the day before that, a couple friends of mine that are also LAPD officers had a chance to come in and talk about life on the streets and stuff like that, and how that climate works today. So all those that you can find on the YouTube here, Morse Media Studios, new YouTube, it all clings together because we're finding it from the blue behind the badge scenarios, and then we're looking at it from those that are confronted by the badge. And you said that you talked about probable cause, which is getting more rampant of what they call probable cause, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Which leads you into the criminal aspect of it. Because I think the last brother that got shot was stopped on a bicycle for a bicycle infraction or something like that.
Right.
Now, I don't know what kind of infractions you can get on a bicycle where they really have to pull you over and you end up, you know what I'm saying?
And actually use a gun against you.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
So that's part of the reason, that's part of this Section 1983 civil rights violations in the first place, is because we do have a right to walk on the street. There's no pass laws technically.
Okay.
And in California, it's a little stronger. You don't have to answer the police if they ask you who you are or where you're going. You don't really have to answer those questions because you don't have to help them make their case. Unfortunately, good luck with that.
Yeah, that's why you get beat upside the head. You know what I'm saying?
Black,
Kicked around. Yeah.
But that actually is.
Right.
You're right. You don't, because what happens is the police and their inordinate contact. You know, if you contact with somebody a certain number of times, yeah, sure, there's going to be some friction.
Right.
And they're constantly stopping, frisking, asking questions, interrogating African American males and African American people. Period. They're constantly doing that.
Right.
And every single time they do that, it's a confrontation because anybody feels uncomfortable being interrogated. Anyone feels uncomfortable being stopped and detained.
Right.
So the problem is that you don't have to wait. I mean, you can say, "Am I being arrested?" And if they say no, then say, "Okay, good day. Have a nice day. Just keep on walking, keep on moving."
Good luck with that too.
Well, that's true. They might say that you're obstructing justice, but if they do stop you, make sure that you make it clear that you don't consent to any searches, that you want to speak to your lawyer, that you are exercising your First Amendment right. I mean, your Fifth Amendment right, and keep a lawyer's number in your pocket just in case.
Right.
You know,
dial, yeah.
And hopefully, use the buddy system. Have a friend with you. Maybe they can record what's going on. Although the police are supposed to have cameras, somehow they accidentally go off when somehow they get turned off accidentally.
Yeah.
When there's a crucial time. I mean, the whole time they're not turned off, but when there's this crucial, disputable moment, all of a sudden, wow, what a coincidence. What a coincidence it got turned off.
Right.
But they do that. They do evasive, the officers sometimes do evasive things. Like I had a client say that every time the officer spoke, it was a CHP officer. Every time the officer spoke, they put their hand over their recorder. So that they couldn't hear them and couldn't hear the answer. They did that every single time. And so then they said the audio tapes had been lost, but then they were also unintelligible.
Right.
But it was funny because it was it was interesting because here we go with another judge it's just that white supremacy is just so ingrained. This was a female judge, but she had this, my client was black, the officer was a CHP officer, and we had established that a perfect storm happened. The dispatch record was destroyed and purged. The MVARs, which are the cameras that are on the car, they weren't working. The audio that they have wasn't working, and the videotapes were not working all at the same time. So there was a dispute about why my client was stopped in the first place. And I maintain he was stopped for driving while black. He was changing his tire in West Covina, which is a mostly, was a predominantly white neighborhood, and that's why he was stopped initially. But because they didn't want that, so there should have been a dispatch. The CHP claimed that he stopped him because there was an accident that was reported. But there was no 911 dispatch call about the accident. So how did he find out about the accident?
Right.
And even if he found out about it by someone talking to him, then they go on their car radio, and then they have a conversation with dispatch. And they always are supposed to be in touch and saying, I'm stopping this person. Even the initial stop, before they stop their car, remember, we all watch TV, they're supposed to say, I see a vehicle by the side of the road. This matches the description of the vehicle that was in an accident. I'm going to stop and question the suspect. And they stop. And then, and they're MVARs. You watch cops. The camera that's on the front of the CHP is pointed towards the car so that they can capture anything that happens. Usually to protect the officer because and to preserve the case. But say, like what recently happened, very sadly, was these two officers got shot. sometimes what happens is when they come up to the car, they get shot, and from the person inside the car. So they keep the cameras on, but for some reason, the cameras weren't working. So they got really upset when I said, well, I'm going to do a pitches motion because I want to see if this happened before. And I also want to know about the training because I'm pretty sure that their cameras are not supposed to be turned off, especially when they're in the middle of a stop. And I want to know what kind of training. I want to pull the training manuals for the CHP. I want to know what kind of training this officer went through and how to use his equipment.
Right.
And the judge said to me, we don't have it, so move on. We have the officer here. And I said, well, that's exactly what I don't want to do, Your Honor. I do not want to rely on self-serving testimony from the officer. That's what I don't want to do. This is why the legislature said we need the cameras. We need the cameras to be able to impeach the officer because my client has a different story about what happened.
Right.
And now, it's his side, this guy's side, and there's the right side. And the camera is objective observer.
Right.
It's not on anybody's side. It's just going to tell us what happened. And so I'm not willing to go forward. I said, Your Honor, I'm going to do a Brady motion because this is spoliation evidence. This is a case where the exculpatory evidence was somehow lost because the fact that it was lost gives us the prima facie. It gives us like an innuendo that it must have been exculpatory, especially all of it at the same time. We should have been able to piece it together like we get the 911 dispatch call.
Right.
Or we have the audio from his uniform because CHP doesn't use the video cameras. They just use audio. But there are video cameras inside the vehicle and on the outside of the vehicle. But none of that was working.
Wow. But, one thing I've been seeing lately on the news is they are consistent. They pulled over Mayor Asia.
Asia Brown,
in Compton.
Yes.
And, she was kind of like tripped out behind the whole scenario. Now, if you're working in that department, there's no way
you shouldn't know who
that
the mayor
you should
is.
know who the mayor was. I mean, by sight. I mean, it's not like she's invisible. She's much to do around a lot of things. So I don't know how they do that. But
she's an African American female, and she's in Compton. So there's a lot of African American females.
Right.
And apparently they just couldn't differentiate one from the other.
Right. We do not all look alike. Come on, guys.
That's the point.
Yeah.
But they treated her just the way they treat everyone else. So they weren't discriminating against her. They weren't. They didn't respect her class or her status.
Right.
But they really know who she was.
Right.
And but she got to see how regular citizens are treated.
Exactly.
And it's not nice.
Right.
So that's the thing is just being able to be indiscriminately stopped. That has to stop.
Yeah.
We talked about New York. New York had a policy of stop and frisk, and they had frisked so many Latino and African American men in New York, and that was the reason why the crime rates were so high because they would frisk them just walking down the street. Another thing was, until recently, having 3 joints was possession for sale. And there are some people that literally will smoke 3 joints in a day.
Right.
Really in a few hours, So, and that would be personal use.
Right.
But they made the laws a little bit, they stretched it a bit for a lot of black people and Latino people. And it caused the prisons to be overly crowded.
Right.
And first there was a case called Plata, which it went all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. It was from California.
Okay.
And it stated that it was cruel and unusual punishment to pack people into the prisons because we were at 200-something% of capacity. So the justices said, yes, it is cruel and unusual punishment to pack people into the prison. So they ordered an immediate reduction in the prisoner population. 3 years later, that reduction had not yet occurred.
Wow.
And finally, one of the judges, because it was pushed back down to the local courts, and the judge said, look, I don't care how you do it, but I'm giving you a drop-dead deadline.
Right.
You will release 20-30% of the prisoners right now so that we get into at least, now we're at like 180% of capacity. You know what I mean? You're going to release these prisoners immediately. So then we had something called AB 109. And what they did, you can't get that money away from, that's what we're talking about, defund the police. It's like prying it from their cold, dead hands. They will not release that money. So what ended up happening, I at the time had a CBO, a community-based organization that dealt with drug abuse, drug treatment. What happened was all of us CBOs were arguing that we should get some of this money because these people are going to be flooded into our community and they're broken.
Right.
And they're going to need certain services. They're going to need mental health. They're going to need substance abuse treatment. They're going to need housing. They're going to need employment services. That money should be pushed down to the community-based organizations that deal with those issues. Instead, the probation department took the money and the corrections department took the money. And as you know, rehabilitation has not been part of our correction system for some time. It might be there. The word is there, but it hasn't been meaningful in a very long time. So they fought over that for a few years. My clinic got shut down. A lot of other clinics got shut down. And at that time, I think the safety net was broken because over 200 substance abuse clinics were shut down in L.A. County. And a lot of them in the black community were shut down. And right after that, we see an uptick in homelessness and a lot of things that happen. But the money was given to law enforcement. And finally, after years of protests from the community, some of the money was given to the community, but not the lion's share, not even a whole. A lot of it went to the sheriff's department and the probation department. And most people don't realize, because I go to the city council meetings, 60% of our budget for the county and for the state of California goes to law enforcement. For the county, it goes to the sheriff's department. And for the city, it goes to LAPD. It is a significant amount of money. But can you imagine, where attention goes, energy flows, right?
Right. That's
so
right.
if we're going to focus on 60% of our budget going towards policing, then we're going to have more crime because they've got to justify their existence. They've got to justify that budget. And literally they'll go get people for low-level offenses and traffic violations and trump them up or whatever and just get a whole bunch of people just to show that, yes, we have a lot of crime here. That's one thing. And then the other thing is we can't have all this money going into that tranche. That's what the defunding. When we're talking about defunding the police, we're not talking about taking all their money away. We're talking about taking some of that money that goes towards community service, like DARE, the DARE program. So there are community programs that can take that money and do that.
Right.
Yes, there's some outreach that the police need to do, but if they were to, if they had, like, for instance, police are called on to pick up people. This has happened to me one time. I called, and I thought I was calling the PET team, and they said, no, we don't send the PET team out. We send the police out. And the police are not trained. LAPD is not trained. And that's when I had my substance abuse clinic, and my client was having suicidal ideation, so I called the PET team on him. When they got there, now this guy, they called him Haas because he looks like the guy in the Ponderosa. Remember Haas?
Right, exactly.
He looked just like him.
Right.
He was a big guy too.
Right.
So the LAPD came and they said, "Well, we're going to handcuff him." And he goes, He said, "I don't feel good about this, Ms. Dixon. I really don't I don't want to be handcuffed." He asked if he could be handcuffed in the front, and they said no. So, and then I felt like he might not trust me because, I actually was calling to get him help, and now he's getting arrested,
Gotcha.
And that wasn't the intent. The intent was to get him help. So, and a lot of people panic and they're afraid of police. Just look what happened with George Floyd, Black men, even myself, the stories I heard and everything, I grew up in South Central, and I ran from the police before because I was afraid of them. One time it was late night and I was coming home from a party and the police were after me, and I lived on 54th and McKinley. So this was in, this was in the black neighborhood.
Right.
And it's 2 a.m. in the morning and they put their lights on and it's dark and nobody's around. So I just kept on going because I had read, okay, you can go to a lighted place, go somewhere where there are witnesses. And when they finally stopped me, they were really mad at me and they said, and I just was burst into tears and started screaming and crying. And they go, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, "You're going to kill me. You're going to kill me. I know you are. You're going to rape me, and then you're going to kill me." And they go, "No, we're the police." I said, "I know." And I was crying. I know. That's why I'm afraid.
Right.
And they were like, no, we're the police. I said, "You're not going to help me. I know you are. You're going to kill me." And they were like, because I had just gotten finished reading
right.
a whole bunch of stuff about people getting raped by the police and getting killed by the police. And now they're stopping me at 2 a.m. in the morning, and there's no witnesses, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be the victim now.
Right, exactly.
You know, so I really was scared, and I can see this as a visceral feeling. I didn't trust them, and I was afraid of them.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's the temperature now. I mean, not all uniformed officers are bad.
That's true.
I've had a couple of experiences back in the day when, I haven't drank in like 20 years. But when I was drinking at the time, playing basketball and drinking on the weekends, that's what we do, right? So I had just left the basketball court. It was one of, I think it was King Day, and we just went out there and played a pickup game out there by the L.A. College. So, it's around the place, and the substations right there for the highway patrol and whatever. And I had just got in the car, and this highway patrolman pulls up behind me, and black guy. So he gets out and approaches my vehicle, and then two undercovers pull up behind him, white guys, and they pull up. And so they were just trying to geriatrically push him out to get in. He said, no, I got this. And he was a big enough brother to say, I got this. So they got him. And he says, you had anything to drink? And I says, yeah, well, we just picked up a pickup game, so I had a couple of beers or whatever. And he says, you got anything in the car like that? Open it? Yeah, I had the can I was drinking. He said, well, you know what? I need you to pour that out. So I poured it out. He said, I need you to wait until you get home to do your celebration. And so that was one. Another time when I was working out there in Alameda, I was on the freeway, Glendale Freeway, and this motorcycle pulls me over, right? And the guy jumps off the motorcycle, and he's as big as this doggone wall, right? White guy. And so he approaches the car, and so, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, I had finished the pickup game, so I had my, like the McDonald's cup tall one with beer in it. So he says, you got beer in the car? I said, well, first off, what was going on? He said, well, I see you got a new car here, you know what I'm saying? And so, what are you trying to do? Blow out the carbs or something like, in other words,
yes.
And so I said, no, I'm looking at my, I didn't see that I was. He said, well, you got any beer in there? And I said, yeah, right here in the cup. He said, I'm gonna need you to pour it out. He said, you got any more beers in the car? I said, yeah, I got a 6-pack in the back. He said, I need for you to pour the 6. And so I'm sitting there looking. So he makes me open the cans of beer and pour it out. And he said, I would recommend that you wait till you get home to drink. Okay? He said, but I'm going to give you a ticket for the excessive speed. And so when I finally went to court out there in the valley, right, the guy shows up. The police officer shows up. Now, I'm trying to wait him out. I mean, if I get continuances as much as I can, maybe he's not going to show up.
Right.
But he showed up. And the day that I was there, I had my Raiders jersey. He said, oh, you're a Raider fan? Yes. So I came to court again. I had my another Raiders thing, because I was a Raiders man. And so he says, still a Raiders fan, huh? Because they wanted us to go out in the hallway and see if we can get a resolution.
Yes.
Yeah. So he said, I see you still a Raiders fan. I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, you know what? He says, I'm going to let this one go.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah. And so those are the 2 times I got stopped when I was out of bounds.
Way
and if
out
I
of
had
bounds.
that was because you're a DEI lady, you deal with DUI.
Yes.
Now, if I had that on my record, I could have done the things I've done since.
That's
but
true.
both instances, a black and a white, allowed me to see what would have happened had I. So you know what I'm saying? There are some good ones.
Yes,
You know what
but
I'm saying?
that was not supposed to be done. Like when I worked for the DA's office, we used to do writs of mandate to the judge to make them follow the mandatory minimums on DUIs, because there was back in the day a very lenient attitude towards DUIs. The problem is that many people died, many people lost their lives, and MAD was very Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Right.
Very instrumental in changing the law and holding people more accountable, because the fact that you're drinking with an open container and just drinking while you're driving, not drinking before or after you drive.
Right.
Yeah, that's really, really dangerous.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was a life-saving lesson to me, too, because I'm like, this is really crazy. But you know what I'm saying? For me to be doing, and after that, it was like, this is not working for me. When things don't work out for me, they just don't work for me. I saw them do drugs. I can't see where they work out for anybody else. So how's it going to work out for me? So that made me say, you know what? I don't need to be drinking. You know what I'm saying? What does it do? But those that are still doing it and are, behind the wheel or whatever, then people are dying behind that.
That's right.
And it's food for thought.
That's why the law is so strict, because it might be a casual thing, but it only takes a second for you to lose control and kill somebody.
Just like that. Yeah.
And people don't realize that.
Right. But you're a DUI attorney too.
Yes.
So, I know you've seen a lot of people come in for different things, but how's that basically, with the laws changing as it is, how stringent is it now than it was before?
It's very, very strict.
Okay.
Very strict. Mm-hmm. And case in point, I had a young lady in Compton. She had her baby in the back seat. Mm-hmm. She was drunk, and she had a solo accident on the freeway, like the 110 over by Compton. Or maybe it was the 105 in that area.
Okay.
She ran off the road into a ditch, and so there was a scratch on her baby's father. He was in the passenger seat. There was a scratch on his head. He might have hit the windshield. So now, and then she has her child in the back in a car seat. Bad news. That's felony child endangerment. If you have a child under the age of 14 in the car when you're driving drunk, that's felony child endangerment. That's another tag. That's going to be tagged on there.
Okay.
On top of that, if there is an injury while you're driving drunk, that's also a more serious offense.
Okay.
So an accident with injury is treated differently. And in this particular case, she had a license in her job, and that license was suspended immediately because of that charge.
Right.
So then she wanted to get some kind of leniency, and she was saying that, he didn't really get hurt that bad. But the problem is, it's like with the domestic violence. When the officers come on scene and they observe someone injured, someone with blood on them, say it's domestic violence, or whether it's or they have an injury accident and they observe the injury, then that ups the level.
Right. Okay. I got you.
That really does. And then you have to really work with the judge to try to get some kind of probation, try to get it bumped down from a felony to a misdemeanor and possibly expunged. The problem with those are they're unsealable felonies. So if they do come up, when you have anything to do with like child endangerment, domestic violence, those stay with you. And very difficult to get them expunged.
Right.
Because first of all, they're felonies. So felonies in the state of California you have to petition the governor for a certificate of rehabilitation.
Okay, right.
And that's not easy to do. It's a process, and it takes a while. That's number one. Number two, in some cases, like with the marijuana laws, they allow you to automatically bump the felonies down to a misdemeanor and expunge them. But that's not even enough. You might still need to get a lawyer or understand how you can seal the arrest record and destroy it.
Okay.
Because if someone runs a live scan on you for a job or something that you're doing, they're like you say, you want to have a foster kid, or anything that requires a live scan. You're getting a license to be a nurse or any professional license. That will come up. The arrest will come up, and the arrest can preclude you. So that's why they made a rule in California that you could literally, there is another motion that you can make where you can actually destroy the arrest records, have them sealed and destroyed.
Wow. So that is with the DUI aspect, but also you have the criminal aspect that you do criminal law too. But I see where that hand could reach into the other side because of the extenuating circumstances you just mentioned, from the DUIs to where it can actually go into a criminal now.
DUI is a criminal matter.
Right,
it's part of the, it's part of the vehicle code, but it's a criminal code. It's a criminal matter. It's either a misdemeanor or a felony. Very rarely an infraction. And sometimes when we do a wet reckless or excessive speed, might be a plea that the judge might take in lieu of, and that's when you might have a very low blood alcohol level, or maybe they can't test you. Right now, they don't have effective tests for marijuana. And to see what the serum dilution is, to find out how strong it was or whether it's in your system. It's kind of iffy. Some drugs don't stay. Now, marijuana stays in your system for a longer time because it lives in your fatty tissue. And that's where the problem comes up, because it is legal now to use it, but when did you use it? You know what I mean? It might still be showing in your bloodstream and because it's in your fatty tissue. So that's where the problem comes in. They don't have anything that they can say, oh, alcohol, on the other hand, processes very quickly. They know exactly the rate at which it dissipates after you've, so they can basically extrapolate. If it's 4 hours later, what was your blood alcohol? You know, if you still have it in your system, then you probably had a certain amount in your system to begin with. And so they know that. They actually know hour by hour and by your body weight and all that, you know, how much you have. Now, there's another thing that's very dangerous that people don't realize is prescription drugs.
Right, I got you.
And they treat it worse than alcohol. And I had a client who, very mild-mannered, little, kind of a mousy little man, who got an operation, you know, cosmetic surgery.
Right.
And was given, you know, Xanax, which is what used to be called Valiums, you know, something to calm him down, anxiety, and maybe something else, but it was definitely, he had Xanax. Which is benzodiazepine, and he had something else. So he's driving. His roommate wanted him to pick her up from the store. And she goes, oh, yeah, I got groceries. I need you to pick me up from the store. And he goes, well, you know, I just got, you know, I'm still resting after my operation. And, well, no, it's just a few, you know, it's just a few blocks. Come on and get me. And he gets in the car, goes down there and picks her up. On the way back, there's a center divider in the middle of the street, and it's a really wide street. It's about 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
There's a little old lady, and, you know, she's crossed to here, and she has a little walker. And she's actually, it takes her so long to cross the street. He doesn't see her at all. She's in the median divider. He's not looking for her. He's going about 40 miles an hour next to the far lane of the street. And she steps off the curb, and he hit her. And she had to have a leg amputated. Wow. So he was looking at a very, very serious felony because they tested him, found out that he had the benzodiazepine in his system. He said that he didn't know that it would make him drowsy and that he wasn't supposed to take it. He was taking it. He had just had this surgery about a day before, not less than a day before. And, you know, usually for the first 72 hours, you take some pain medication and some anxiety medication. So that's what he had. It slowed his response time. He really, literally did not see this person at all. Right. And to his credit, unfortunately, you don't expect, most of the time people don't cross from that side of the street. We're talking about crossing not from the right side of the street, but from the left side of the street, from the far left lane, which is usually the fast lane. She steps off, and he hit her, and she's about 70. I don't know. But she loses her leg, so that was a bad one. Right. And he had to, you know, I'm not sure ultimately what happened because I left that firm before we disposed of the case. But I know that we're trying to resolve it, but it was a terrible case because the problem is that she sustained such. This is another thing. If you take something before a jury or if the judge, when somebody's injured like that, somebody has to pay. That's how they see it. Somebody has to pay. And your client is the one that, you know, was there. Right. So that's a problem because he really didn't have intent, but he did get in that car with that prescription drug in his system. But it's not like he drank alcohol and got in the car. But for some reason, they actually treat it worse when you have when you're under prescription drugs.
Wow. Since we're talking on that one, here's a question for you. When now you could turn on the television any time of the day and find that somebody hit somebody, something like that, and kept going.
Yes,
kept going.
That's what they do.
At what time would somebody that's maybe listening say, okay, I need to get an attorney, and, you know what I'm saying, and really come to their...
Right away, because I'm going to tell you what happens. There are cameras everywhere. I mean, everywhere. Don't assume there's not. We didn't even know up until recently that there were cameras on all the traffic, that the traffic, you know, Caltrans put, and then there's for Los Angeles too, that they put cameras everywhere.
Right.
Because they want to be able, and they did this many years ago, to be able to gauge the traffic. So they're literally looking at how many cars come by per second. Now they actually have militarized those. So now what they do is they have scanners that scan for license plates. And you'll find that out in a few high-profile cases where people were either hit and run or shot and somebody ran away. Like with these, you can bet that this person that shot those sheriffs, they drove away in a car. They're going to pull those cameras. They're going to find a camera that shows that person and their license plate. And once they know the license plate, they'll put it in the system, and it'll always be scanning for that license plate.
Okay.
And once they know, they'll go after them. They'll find them. So people don't realize that there's not only is there surveillance cameras at nearby stores that pick up outside, like for instance, case in point, my cousin has a storefront that's on La Brea. At 2 a.m. in the morning, someone shot someone because they were driving down La Brea and apparently it was road rage. The person was driving erratically, cut this other person off. They may have flipped him off. He was wrong, but he made a U-turn and came around and shot that person in the head and killed him.
Wow.
And it was all caught on that camera.
Right.
So when the police came, they were looking at different storefronts asking to see the cameras to see if the cameras picked it up, and he picked it up perfectly.
Wow.
And the license plate and everything. So he thought he was getting away with something.
Actually wasn't.
And he wasn't.
Wow.
Even though it was dark, those cameras can pick up.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So, picked it up, and so that person will get caught because they had the license plate, they had the car.
You hear that, folks? If you're thinking about doing something crazy, believe me, the camera, somebody's watching.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that's a few of the criminal aspects we look at. But what other kind of criminal cases that you handle in your office?
Theft,
okay.
Prostitution, pimping and pandering. It's interesting because they will up-level charges on people. So I had a client, and we're out in like Rancho Cucamonga. That's very, very conservative territory. So the problem was the client was they actually were going to charge him with trafficking, which is when they up-level it to trafficking, that's a serious felony.
Okay.
Basically, he had been incarcerated for some time. He had been speaking to this woman from the jail, and she asked him to come down and meet her. And so the text messages that go back and forth are, honey, are you going to get my nails done? He says, oh, yeah, I'm going to pay for your nails to get done, everything. So the special victim unit DA that was in charge, she comes in, she's late, she comes in, and she's dressed just like on TV. She's got her high heels, we call them CFMPs. She's got like 5-inch heels. She's got a pencil skirt. She's dressed just like somebody that's on, special victim unit or in one of those. And she comes up to me and starts talking to me and says, I'm really concerned about, these text messages. And I'm saying, well, what? I looked at them and I didn't find anything disturbing about them. She goes, well, I think I want to up-level this to trafficking. I said, wait a minute. The woman admitted that she was already a prostitute. It's not like he brought her. The trafficking implies that he kidnapped her and forced her to, to have sex with men for money for his personal gain.
Got you.
So I don't see how that's the case when they've actually had a relationship for some time, talking while he was in prison.
Got you.
And then he came down here to visit her, and, unfortunately he was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right, exactly.
And I said, I hate to say this, but I happen to know that this might be a cultural thing because I know black women that wouldn't date somebody if they didn't give them a full set of nails or do their hair.
Right.
And that's basically
it's a part of the gimmick, huh?
So how's that going to play to the jury that these are all codes for him trafficking her?
Right. Got you. That's crazy, but it happens. Now, do you delve into any kind of immigration? Because that's a big thing too, immigration laws.
Well, there's an overlap because immigration is big. It's actually the courts have been packed, and right now they're on a moratorium. Right now, everyone is stuck at the border. So I haven't even been to Tijuana, but I hate to see what it looks like. Every border crossing. Trump made an executive order that everyone had to wait at the border. Even when previously, if you were seeking asylum under the Convention Against Torture, it was mandated that if a person was seeking asylum, they would have to be let into the country so that they could make their asylum petition. And while they were waiting to have that heard, they can still stay in the country. But if, in fact, they lose, which they do lose a lot,
right,
they will then be deported.
Okay.
So now what he's done is say, no, they have to wait there. So the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned him right away.
Okay.
But they play dirty pool. So the Homeland Security belongs to the government, to the federal government. All they have to do is pretty much play games with them and refuse to take their petition. And then they have to wait at the border. So there's over 100,000 people at the border, and they're of every persuasion, not just Hispanic and not just from Central and South America. These people are from every country in the world that are trying to get here because they have to wait outside the country before they can come in.
Right. Yeah, that makes it kind of rough, I'm sure, with what's happening now, the unemployment. And, I mean, people still waiting that are legitimately residents and working that can't get the, so, you know.
Trump changed something else, the workers' visas. He put a moratorium on those. There was also something called a diversity visa. So for countries that traditionally did not have a lot of immigration, there was something called a diversity visa, like Australia would be one of those countries. And what they would do is people would join a lottery. And their lottery would come up, and then they would have the opportunity to immigrate to the United States if they wanted to, and they would just have to follow through at that time. Well, he suspended, so even people that won the lottery and are, should be able to petition to come to the United States, he's suspended their applications. So it's really bad for them, especially those that have received a change in status. But he's not allowing them to go through with it. And like the DACA people, they've been going back and forth for more than 8 years. First they think they have status, and now there was another ruling, and then the Supreme Court just recently, I think it was a day or two ago, a couple of days ago, they made a ruling that this will sunset, that the DACA will sunset in 2021. So that would mean that whoever comes in as the president, if it's not him, they might have an opportunity to do something about that.
Right. Wow. But I mean, even then we're doing that one there, then we're still stuck with the ones that are here again. Let's go back to the ones that are here again. That the eviction is hitting, you know what I'm saying? Because they got a moratorium to be able to, put your rent off, but it doesn't go away, I'm sure.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So a lot of immigrants are being taken advantage of in that respect. But the other issue there is that part of our law has always been that you have to be self-sustaining. You can't come over here to be on the public dole or to be an addict. You cannot be a habitual drunkard or a drug addict. That's a sign of low moral character.
Right.
So this is where the criminal dovetails in. You get a DUI, you can be deported. So a lot of times you do need an attorney to navigate through that to hopefully somehow negotiate with the DA to give you a non-deportable offense.
Got you.
And if you get two, then you're really in bad shape.
Right.
Because then they can make the case that you're a habitual drunkard.
Right.
And it says specifically that we don't want people that are addicts and habitual drunkards in the United States. So that's a deportable offense.
Okay, got you.
And it's a criminal matter. And so also, like any crime that you commit is possibly a deportable matter.
Right.
Because whether even it's a misdemeanor or a felony, it could be. It depends on if it's a misdemeanor involving fraud or certain things. It can be considered moral turpitude. If it's a felony, any felony, I believe you're done with the immigration.
But then that encroaches on another practice you have too that deals with civil rights. You deal with civil rights aspects too, correct?
Yes. The civil rights aspect, it's tricky because we've been fighting a long time. So technically a person, most people don't realize this, but children under the age of 18 don't really have civil rights.
Wow.
They're not a citizen yet.
Okay.
And people that are not citizens have some civil rights. And this is because there was a lot of fights going on regarding that.
Okay.
At first, they had none because they're not a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, there's been a lot of cases that have whittled away at that and tried to at least open the door and give them a little more rights.
Gotcha.
But that's why you see people being detained in these cages by private prisons. I mean, technically, I would say that private prisons, I would sue them personally for false imprisonment. I mean, why are they allowing private companies and mercenary companies to imprison people? But they do it with everyone.
Right.
But with the immigrants, it was a huge thing because they use mostly private prisons because they can do things. I guess their thinking was that they could do things that the government couldn't do.
Free slave labor. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But also the civil rights that you deal with, you also deal with citizens that, you know what I'm saying, are like you were seeing in the paper every day or hearing on the news that having their rights violated, correct?
Right. Civil rights are like being stopped and frisked when you don't have probable cause.
Right.
Another issue is, more importantly, like when you go to protests. Case in point, I had a client who was shot with a rubber bullet, and the rubber bullet penetrated because it was shot point blank. It wasn't 10 feet away.
Wow.
It has to be more than 10 feet away, and if it is less than that, it penetrated the skin and it acted like a regular bullet. It went into the person's stomach. It was bleeding. It fragmented because the bullets, even though they say they're rubber, they're actually compressed foam, and they're when it went in, it fragmented, and it was impossible to get it out. She ran the risk of infection.
Oh, wow.
It had to stay open for a while because your body will naturally expel something too. It's like if you had a splinter, technically it would expel it after a while.
Right.
So, so it was really painful. So people have lost their eye. People have lost different things because if it hits soft tissue, if you imagine it went into the stomach and actually penetrated and went like an inch into this person's stomach, what would it do if it goes in your eye?
Exactly.
We found out in San Diego.
Exactly.
A lady lost her eye. And here you are, and they're not supposed to aim for your head. They're not supposed to aim for soft areas. But even if they aim for the torso, if they're less than 10 feet away, that's what happened. So they did aim for her torso, but they hit her in the stomach.
It's crazy out there. So as we're getting ready to wrap up, we know the different aspects of law that you do, you know what I'm saying? And we see that you're able to bring in your expertise. So how does somebody reach out to you, you know what I'm saying, as busy as you are?
Well, they can try me on my website. They can look at my website, and it talks about that. And I also have some ebooks on the website.
Okay.
One is what to do if you're arrested, and another one is what to do if you get a DUI. And I have another one that's going to come up about protests and what you should do, how you should prepare, and what you should do if you're involved in a peaceful protest and you want to make sure to protect your rights or preserve your rights in the event that you get arrested so that later on you can sue. My number is 877-384-5239. Once again, that's 877-384-5239. And my website is DixonJusticeCenter.com. And that's all one word. It's all spelled out, DixonJusticeCenter.com.
And so you practice in California?
Yes.
Okay, so are there any other, if somebody else is saying, I got a friend of mine in New York, a friend of mine, because I know there are attorneys that have different practices in different places.
It depends. Sometimes if it's entertainment law, because I do entertainment law, I represented Shaggy for a long time, and I represent a lot of different artists. Then sometimes you can, because the entertainment's reach is everywhere.
Exactly.
And they may have, their main office might be in New York.
Right.
But, I mean, technically you have to, be barred in that state.
Right.
But I have friends everywhere, so they can ask me questions, and I may be able to refer them to someone in a different state, in many different states, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Florida, New York, So, I get around a little bit, and I'm a member.
I know you're an expert. So as we're getting ready to go out right now, if you could sum up in just like, a couple of sentences, why an attorney and why you?
Well, an attorney knows the law. I know a lot of times people think they can do it themselves and they say it's not rocket science, but we said already that he who represents himself has a fool for a lawyer, because there's certain things you just don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And you can mess up the case in the very beginning. I've had several people call me saying they've taken the case on their own, and now it's almost to the end, and now they want to call in an attorney. A lot of attorneys won't touch that because we don't know what came before.
Right.
And we might have to clean something up, or we may have lost some rights that were not preserved properly in the beginning. And sometimes you can't unring the bell. So we don't want to get a malpractice lawsuit based on something that we didn't even do, that we were not responsible for and couldn't have been responsible for. However, there are things called limited scope agreements. And so the State Bar did say that so people can be represented in a particular hearing, they can do what's called a limited scope agreement. And even at the courthouse, they actually have now a form so that if you are in the courthouse and you see an attorney say, look, I'm having a hearing on custody and I don't feel comfortable doing it, right then and there, an attorney can sign a limited scope agreement to just represent you for this hearing, for this request for order, and possibly until the order is actually granted or denied. So until there's a disposition of that order. And so in that case, that you do a limited scope agreement, and it'll say just this hearing, all hearings until the order is entered. And so that's how it goes. And so that will help people. I don't recommend, and a lot of people are doing this, they're going with these little paralegal services. There is no recourse. And believe me, they're actually charging you a lot more. I've actually gone in and found out that, hey, I'm appearing on behalf of this client, maybe in a limited scope or a special appearance for another attorney, and come to find out that this paralegal firm has charged them over $4,000 or charged them monthly rent for an unlawful detainer case, and it was way, way more than what they should have paid. So, and there's just no recourse they have. Of course, you can report them to the State Bar, but all they do is put them on a list, and they have no oversight. If it's a lawyer, there's a bond. They can be disbarred. They can be prosecuted. You can get a judgment against them and execute judgment. They can be sanctioned by the court. There is some recourse if a lawyer doesn't do their job the way they should, and if the public becomes at risk because of that. However, there isn't if you deal with just strictly with a paralegal. And a lot of the Hispanic community is being taken advantage of by paralegals who they think are abogados and abogadas, and they're not. They're actually just people that are marketing people that go out there and pass out flyers and get clients.
Wow. So one more time, give your phone number and email address before we get out of here.
My phone number, once again, is 877-384-5239. Once again, 877-384-5239. My website is DixonJusticeCenter.com. Of course, it's www.DixonJusticeCenter.com.
Well, Rhonda, we really appreciate you coming and clearing up some of the mystique and some of the nomenclature behind, the law, and shining a light on how it can help us even during this time of pandemic. So thanks for coming in and, explaining that. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you learned something from the show. If you need an attorney, don't wait till the last minute. When you need it, then give her a call. You have the number, you have the address, just find an attorney that works for you. And please, for your own sake and for my sake, make sure and cover it up. You know what I'm saying? The mask may save your life, but more importantly, I'm hoping it saves my life. So until next time, thank you for joining us here at Legal Synopsis. Thanks also to Ronda Dixon. My name is D. Nice. We'll see you next time. Be safe.